Good morning, Kutztown University. You are listening to Cinema Cid on the radio voice of Kutztown University, KUR. This is Cinema Cid, the titular Kriterion kid, and I think we actually have a pretty packed show of information today. I'm only hoping, but it seems like it's going to be the start of a good week, and maybe the start of a new era. Last week, I had unfortunately made the executive decision to abridge the show now, so for a little while, we will not have the segment of the show wherein I list movies that I wish were on the Criterion Collection and give very good cases as to why I believe they should be. But this is pretty much the only segment of the show that Jeff the Gamer, my second personality, pretty much hijacks. So I feel like maybe cutting that out will cut him out completely. The premise of this show is that I take movies from the Criterion Collection and put their designated spine numbers into a random number generator and then generate the numbers at random to talk about a film at random. For those of you who are unaware, the Criterion Collection is a film distribution company dedicated to gathering the greatest films from around the world and publishing them in editions of the highest technical quality with supplemental features that enhance the appreciation of the art of film. And the reason that this whole RNG system works is that every single Criterion release is given a spine number. Last week, KUR graciously allowed me to take care of Piper for a week. For those unaware, Piper is KUR's little mascot, a very cute stuffed giraffe, all swagged out with some dapper clothing. And I figured I would let her pick some movies for me to watch over the week. Not for me to talk about, because that's going to defeat the purpose of the premise of the show. So I'll only talk about them if I randomly draw them. But if you would like to see the adventures of Piper this past week, you can follow at CinemaCid, the Criterion Kid, on Instagram. Criterion is spelled with a K for alliteration's sake, because K is the first letter in the word kid, and therefore K is the first letter in the word Criterion. And she has been picking some very odd movies. Firstly, she picked Elim Klimov's Come and See. I hope I never have to talk about this film. Don't get me wrong, it's one of the greatest films ever made, but I don't want to think about this film. And then next up, she picks Chantal Ackerman's Jean Dielman 23 qui du commerce mi 80 Bruxelles. And I think she was kind of giving me the stink eye the whole time. There was definitely a lot of bad vibes that day. The movie she picked after that was Jean-Luc Godard's Weekend, which, you know, it's great and everything, but I didn't realize Piper was so into anarchy. I mean, more power to you, I suppose. The day before I had to return her back to the homies at KUR, she picked Louis Buñuel's The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. So like, not only is she into, like, anarchy, but I guess she's also, like, one of those eat the rich people, which, you know, it's pretty sweet, just unexpected. I didn't know, and I'm sure the people at KUR did not know of the eclectic cinematic tastes of Piper, but I guess she's a film buff. It's a good thing that inanimate objects do not have wallets and do not have bank accounts, because if they could buy things, Piper would have no money. She is now back safely in the hands of the people at KUR to be given to the next deserving hosts of its expansive library of shows, which you can listen to when you click on the hyperlinks redirecting you to places where you can listen to the show when you Google Kutztown University Radio. And if there's a show that you are particular to, or if you are looking for more shows to listen to, you can click on the link to the schedule that is on the same page. And if you would like to hear an archive of shows, not just from myself, but the expansive library of other shows that Kutztown University holds on KUR. You can go to mixcloud.com/KU Radio. There is something for everybody there. I think it's time to read a message from the Kutztown Notebook. Whenever I come back, I am going to throw Criterion spine numbers into a random number generator and review movies at random, because I have seen most of the Criterion collection, and this little ASMR bit will have concluded. So stay tuned and stay safe. I will talk to you soon. Welcome back to Cinema Cid, the Criterion Kid, on the radio voice of Kutztown University, KUR. This is Cinema Cid, the titular Criterion Kid, and you are listening to the show where I select Criterion spine numbers and throw them into a random number generator and then review the films at random. The first random selection that we have up is spine 679, which is the entire Zatoichi the Blind Swordsman box set, directed by Kenji Misumi, Kazuo Mori, Tokuzo Tanaka, Kimiyoshi Yasuda, Kazuo Ikihiro, Akira Inoue, Satsuo Yamamoto, and Shintaro Katsu. I don't think I'm going to talk about this because it will be unreasonable to talk about 25 movies. I think that would take up the rest of the episode. But, you know what? I will keep that in mind. I will keep the Zatoichi the Blind Swordsman box set containing all 25 Zatoichi films in the back of my mind, and I will talk about them once I have more time to prepare to talk about 25 movies in one show. So the next spine up is spine 645, which is Keisuke Kinoshita's The Ballad of Narayama, and I haven't seen The Ballad of Narayama, but I hear it's pretty good, and I will probably get it during the July Barnes & Noble sale, in which they sell Criterion Collection titles for 50% off. But until then, I'm going to talk about spine 367, which is Robert Day's The Haunted Strangler. Just kidding. I'm not going to talk about that because I haven't seen it. The next spine up is spine 1115, which is Adoption, directed by Marta Mazzaros. That is not out. I have not seen that. And because it is not out, it is exempt from the Criterion Collection, which means you can forgive me for not having seen it because it is not yet currently on the Criterion Collection. So the next spine up is spine 690, which is The Housemaid, directed by Kim Ki-young. I have not seen that either. So spine 309 is Ugetsu, directed by Kenji Mizoguchi. That is a film that I have seen, so let's discuss it. Kenji Mizoguchi's Ugetsu is a film from 1953 that depicts the intense desires that corrupt people, even if those desires are admirable. It tells two different stories that kind of correlate with one another, essentially an A plot and a B plot, but share the common theme of toxic ambition and how, like I've said, the corruption that desire could possibly bring. Those two stories are a farmer/potter with his wife and child, and another farmer/potter with his wife and no child. Ugetsu is adapted from two short stories with the events of the A plot and the B plot happening in those two separate stories, being The House in the Thicket and The Lust of the White Serpent. But it is really thanks to Yoshikata Yoda's screenplay that combines those two short stories together, keeping them together very fluidly, but also keeping them separate enough to show that they were adapted from two different short stories. The two farmers/potters are named Genjuro and Tobei, and while their skill sets are similar, they do both have two different desires. Genjuro is very passionate about his art, the art of pottery, and wants to grow his skill with the intent of selling his art. Tobei, on the other hand, wants to become a samurai, And while these desires are admirable, the two characters go to dishonest lengths to achieve these ambitions, inadvertently victimizing their families, which I will get to a little bit later. While the men are on their journey, they are faced with trials that push them over the average threshold of morality. Genjiro's story is more eventful, so I guess I'll talk about his at length first. Once he makes it to town to begin selling off his wares, an old woman and a younger woman of royalty begin shopping for Genjiro's wares. Apparently they are big fans of his wares, always have been, and now that they get to meet the man who was behind this beautiful artwork, he is then invited to the castle from which they reside. And then after that, the woman asks Genjiro to marry her, and he says yes, in spite of already being a married man, I guess so he can get rich, or something. And it turns out the woman is a ghost lady, and she doesn't exist, and the man wakes up in the ruins of the castle, because the castle has been destroyed, and it turns out that this has been a ghost story the whole time, at least Genjiro's half. In his quest to become a samurai, Tobei steals the head of a general from a man who killed the general because the general was asking for death. And Tobei brings this head as a treasure to the commander, and then the commander gives him armor and weapons. While Genjiro and Tobei are out committing adultery and murder, respectively, Genjiro's wife is killed for food. I should rephrase that because it sounded like I just said the people who killed her then ate her, but she had food on her person, and they killed her for the food. I will choose my words more carefully next time. And Tobei's wife becomes a prostitute working in a brothel, since money is now even harder to come by without a second person to help. At this brothel, Tobei is actually reunited with his wife, which is bittersweet considering the atrocities that Tobei has committed, as well as the atrocities committed upon Tobei's wife. Which I didn't mention, but if you can imagine the lawless historical Japan, you probably know what I mean by this. Meanwhile, Genjiro finally makes it home, and sees his wife, who, if you remember, was actually killed, so his wife's not really there, and his child. And they're all reunited, and they're all happy and everything, and then Genjiro wakes up the next morning and finds that his wife was actually dead the whole time, and that it was probably a ghost. Luckily, the child is alive, but will grow up motherless. That is, in essence, the story of Ugetsu. It is definitely a lot more complex than that, especially with the dual narrative, but that is the general gist. Upon its release in 1953, Ugetsu is actually pretty groundbreaking in its submersiveness and the way it blended reality and fantasy, because the film is very grounded in reality for the most part, but then it slowly introduces the supernatural elements of Genjiro's half of the story. But it doesn't feel completely left field, because it's like it was slowly building up to it. And while the possibility was never in the minds of the audience, the probability of something supernatural happening in the story was never out of the question. Ugetsu was a hit upon its release, which is probably thanks to Mizoguchi's very dictatorial directing. He was really discontent with the talent and shot countless amounts of takes because it wasn't really up to his standards, and he was giving direction like William Greaves would give direction in Symbiocycotaxiplasm, but like unironically, meaning that his direction was very vague and not very helpful. And Yoshikata Yoda found it very difficult to work with Mizoguchi as well, because the script went through 5 rewrites and then was continued to be rewritten on the spot during production because Mizoguchi found something in the script that he didn't like. And Mizoguchi was very particular with how historically accurate the props should be. He was essentially just a perfectionist. He was basically a Japanese Kubrick. He had his hand in pretty much almost everything except for the music, because with his old age and health condition, composer Fumio Hayasaka could not continue to fly on set and then back home and then on set and back home repeatedly. So Mizoguchi basically just put full creative control in the hands of Hayasaka for the music, which was also very difficult because Hayasaka was not there to consult Mizoguchi about the tone of the film that he was trying to go for. So Hayasaka would just basically work with assistance of the director to basically try to relate what Mizoguchi was trying to capture. However, despite this hardship, the music, I personally think, captures the tone of Ugetsu very accurately. So good on everybody involved. One more thing I want to mention about Ugetsu is the very subtle cinematography in it. There was a lot of slow movement that is indicative of the supernatural and spiritual themes of this film. The camera slowly moves vertically, looking down at subjects, remaining completely objective, but is also very stylistic in the way it shows off the sets. Mizoguchi talked to his director of photography, Kazuo Miyagawa, and basically said that movies should be like a flowing scroll, like a one-shot style, or like a panoramic image, because it's more effective than just cutting to close-ups of characters for emotional reaction. You can let story unfold as if you were literally unfolding a scroll, as more information is slowly revealed to you. Miyagawa, taking this to heart, shoots many scenes with the camera in the center and literally panning 360 degrees following a character interact with the environment, kind of like depicting it as if it were a stage play. No cuts, just one long take. Apparently the film is just 70% crane shots, which is how they were able to move the camera so slowly and subtly for the vertical movement, and I'm guessing the other 30% was this camera in the center of the stage doing the 360 turn to show everything in a given room. The sensation that Ugetsu became upon its release definitely shows, so check it out. Ugetsu, directed by Kenji Mizoguchi, is pretty good. So watch Ugetsu, directed by Kenji Mizoguchi. It is time for me to go to break, so I will be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Cinema Cid, the Kriterion Kid, on the radio voice of Kutztown University, KUR. This is the show where I take Criterion spine numbers and put them into a random number generator, and then review Criterion spine titles at random, which is what I'm about to do because I've got a little bit of time to do so. So let's peep this out. First spine up is spine 704, which is Riot in Cell Block 11, directed by Don Siegel. And I haven't seen that. Sorry. Next up is Spine 86, which is Einstein, The Sound Years, directed by Sergei Einstein. I've never even heard of that man. He sounds pretty interesting. Maybe I should check out Sergei Einstein. But that's not today, because I haven't seen that. And it appears to be out of print anyway. So, whoops. Spine 1048 is Dos Monjes, directed by Juan Bustillo Oro, which is a film that appears in Martin Scorsese's World Cinema Project number 3, which is Spine 1044. I haven't seen this film, nor have I seen any of the films on this World Cinema Project from Martin Scorsese, nor have I seen any film on any World Cinema Project box set by Martin Scorsese, and this is the third one, so that's like at least 15 movies that I haven't seen, and they're all in the Criterion Collection, and I'm sorry, but I won't be talking about them right now. What I will be talking about is Spine 793, which is The American Friend, directed by Wim Wenders, and actually I guess I won't be talking about that one either, because I have not seen that one either. So the next spine up is 987, which is Clute, directed by Alan J. Pakula, which I haven't seen. So Spine 65 is up next, and Spine 65 is Rushmore, directed by Wes Anderson, which I haven't seen. So Spine 431 is The Thief of Baghdad, directed by 3 people, Ludwig Berger, Michael Powell, and Tim Whalen, and I haven't seen The Thief of Baghdad anyway. This looks pretty swell, though. Maybe I'll check out The Thief of Baghdad one day, but that day is not today. So Spine 196 is Hiroshima Mon Amour, directed by Alain Resnais. That's a French filmmaker, but I don't know how to pronounce his last name because French phoneticism is very difficult for an English speaker like myself. I haven't seen that though. So Spine 824 is Muriel or The Time of Return, again directed by Alain Resnais, and I haven't seen that. I don't think I've seen any film directed by Alain Resnais. Spine 409 is Days of Heaven, directed by Terrence Malick, and I haven't seen that. And I think that unfortunately recently just got out of print like last year or 2 years ago, so I don't know if I will see Days of Heaven anytime soon, nor will I own it anytime soon, if ever, because I bet you it's worth a lot of money now. Let me see how much Days of Heaven, directed by Terrence Malick, is worth real quick. Let me correct myself. The Blu-ray of Days of Heaven is actually out of print. You can still get the DVD. And you can get the DVD for as cheap as $12 on thriftbooks.com. Actually, $10 on alibris.com. The Blu-ray goes for $105, $114, $125. So yeah, not happening. And I only get Blu-ray because DVD is inferior, and I don't know how it is a format that is still in circulation. Spine 1102 is Devi, directed by Satyajit Ray. I have not seen Devi. So Spine 253 is A Woman Under the Influence, directed by John Cassavetes. I get this film all the time. I've drawn this film maybe at least 4 or 5 times since having this show, out of these 1,100 plus titles to draw from, and I still haven't seen it. And I'm just looking at my time now. It looks like I'm coming up on almost 10 minutes worth of time looking for a Spine number to talk about. So I'm very psyched about that. I'm not actually. I'm sorry. This is upsetting me more than it's upsetting you. 1078 is Nightmare Alley, directed by Edwin Goulding, which just got remade by Guillermo del Toro and is probably still in theaters. I'm not sure. I haven't seen the remake of Nightmare Alley, and I actually have not seen the original Nightmare Alley either. So the next Spine up is Spine 1004, which is Now Voyager, directed by Irving Rapper. I haven't seen this film. So the next Spine up is 890, which is Meantime, directed by Mike Leigh, and I haven't seen this either. Spine 207 is... can I say the title of this film? It is The Pornographers, directed by Shohei Imamura, and I have not seen that, and I hope I never draw that film again, because of that title. The next Spine up is the Spine right before 207, Spine 206, which is Lola, directed by Rainer Werner Fassbinder, which I haven't seen. And it shows up in Spine 203, the BRD trilogy, and BRD stands for... I don't know why this is... What does BRD mean? Oh, Bundesrepublik Deutschland... Oh, okay, yeah. Bundesrepublik Deutschland. The official name of West Germany and the United Contemporary Germany. So that's what that trilogy is named after. And I haven't seen any of the movies in it. So the next Spine up is Spine 74, which is Vagabond, directed by Agnes Varda, which I also have not seen. So Spine 554 is Still Walking, directed by Hirokazu Koreeda, and I have not seen that. So Spine 902 is Desert Hearts, directed by Donna Deitch, and I haven't seen Desert Hearts, directed by Donna Deitch. So the next Spine up is Spine 200, just the big 200. And the big 200 is The Honeymoon Killers, directed by Leonard Castle, spelled with a K, just like Criterion in the Instagram handle of this show, Cinema Sid, the Criterion Kid, on Instagram. DM me and tell me about a movie that you've seen, and hopefully I've seen it, because my track record is not very good. Spine 887 is Lost in America, directed by Albert Brooks, and I haven't seen that either. Spine 243 is French Can-Can, directed by Jean Renoir, and I haven't seen French Can-Can, directed by Jean Renoir. So Spine 926 is Manila in the Claws of Light, directed by Lino Brocca, and I haven't seen that either. Surprise, surprise. Spine 520 is Everlasting Moments, directed by Jan Troell, and I have no idea what that is. Spine 443 is La Ronda, directed by Max Ophuls, because there is an umlaut above the U. This is very taxing on me and on my confidence in my ability to do this show, because I claim to have seen most of the Criterion Collection, and I guess apparently I haven't. I haven't seen that either, by the way. Spine 559 is The Mikado, directed by Victor Schertzinger, and I haven't seen that. So the next Spine up is Spine 103, which is The Lady Eve, directed by Preston Sturges, and I haven't seen The Lady Eve, directed by Preston Sturges. So the next Spine up is Spine 1009, and that's Holiday, directed by George Cukor, and I haven't seen that either. Spine 258 is Tanner 88, directed by Robert Altman. He just had a birthday like last week or 2 weeks ago. Happy belated to Robert Altman. Sorry I haven't seen your movie. Spine 1123 is technically not out yet, because that only just got announced. It's Mr. Klein, directed by Joseph Losey, and I haven't seen that, so that's exempt from the Criterion Collection movies that I haven't seen, because it's technically not yet on the Criterion Collection. 677 is The Invited, directed by Lewis Allen, and I have not seen that. Spine 993 is The Cloud Cap Star, directed by Ritwik Gatak, and I haven't seen that. Spine 289 is Hoop Dreams, directed by Steve James, and I've never seen Hoop Dreams. Spine 465 is Dodeska Den, directed by Akira Kurosawa, and I just talked about that like 2 weeks ago for the Criterion Collection Challenge of 2022. That was week 7, a movie from the 1970s, because this film is from 1970. If you want to listen to that, go on to the KUR Mixcloud, mixcloud.com/KU Radio, and listen to the episode from, what was that? I think that was February 15th that happened. So yeah, I won't be talking about that. I already talked about that. Let's hope that the next film is a keeper. The next Spine up is Spine 381. Oh my. Spine 381 is La Haine, directed by Matthew Kasovitz, which I was gonna talk about anyway. So I guess I'll talk about this now. Just give me a moment real quick. The film I chose to talk about for this week's Criterion 2022 challenge is Mathieu Kassovitz' La Haine, which films like Hausu, or Seven Samurai, or Persona, or The Seventh Seal, or Salo 120 Days of Sodom, or Mulholland Drive, or 8.5, or Do the Right Thing, or Jean Dielman 23 qui du commerce mi 80 Bruxelles, or Breathless, or the Godzilla box set, or Stalker, or La Planète Sauvage, or Tokyo Story, or Harakiri, or Chungking Express, or Decalogue, or Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, among a countless amount of other titles. La Haine is an essential Criterion title to own should you find yourself interested in Criterion collecting. Released in 1995, La Haine, or The Hate, is about essentially the conflict between French youths and the police, with very strong class struggle undertones. The plot of the film is very light, actually. Not a lot really happens, but the premise is that it takes place in one day, the day after a riot happens, and three characters named Vince, Hubert, and Cid are all waiting to hear the news of their friend who has been hospitalized by police in the middle of this riot. I would say the film is mainly about the culture that these three characters are ingratiated in, because like I said, it's really about youth culture in France, which because of this also gives me very similar vibes to Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing in terms of its themes and narrative, because you have these scenes that don't really focus on the main characters, but focus on the community, like the DJ at the top floor of their housing projects who are just performing for everybody down in the courtyard, or the breakdancers in the middle of the metro station. But these themes of class division also come from the fact that a majority of the film does take place in this housing project, or what is referred to in French, a banlieue, which really reminds me of the television show The Wire, which also takes place largely in a housing project in some of the storylines where they are exploring the inner mechanisms of the drug market in West Baltimore. I did not mean to mention TV just now. I am sorry. I am talking about movies. The Wire is not good, by the way. Don't watch The Wire, it is a TV show. And if the hosts of Coffee Talk tell you to watch The Sopranos or Euphoria, don't listen to them, because they are also TV shows, and television is an objectively lower art form than film. I am done talking about television now. At its core, La Haine is really about the friendships of these three characters and the odyssey that they go on, because the themes of the class divide are even further explored whenever they get into Paris and experience firsthand the bourgeois culture of the rich and how they stick out like a sore thumb in these places. It's incredible with this film's short runtime how they were able to give all of these characters natural development and goals that an audience really can sympathize with, whether or not they might agree with it, because placing yourselves in their youthful minds gives a more mature audience at least some semblance of a motivation for what they want to do. Saeed seems kind of complacent. He doesn't really have any goals, but he does have a very distinct personality, so I guess that does kind of balance it out. Hubert wants to get out of this gang that he's in with these two delinquents, as well as the other people that they are acquainted with, because he really wants to focus on his education and keeping his family safe. And Vince, the person who is at the center of the conflict between these three, wants to get vengeance on the police for their hospitalized friend. So much so that he actually steals a gun from a police officer the night before during the riot and intends to use it on a police officer on the chance that his friend dies because of this police brutality, as if it would change anything. Basically, the whole movie is just these three going around. Like I said, it's basically an odyssey of sorts, and it's just them doing their delinquent hijinks until the very, very end, like the last minute or so, which would spoil the whole movie. So me talking about it is kind of negligible, and therefore I will not mention it unless it had a bigger role. Stylistically, La Haine is very interesting. The first thing to note is that it's oddly in black and white, which actually alienated a lot of people from seeing it back in 1995 for whatever reason. And another thing that stands out about this film style is the cinematography of Pierre Haïm, who uses a lot of camera lenses with very high focal lengths. The backgrounds are constantly blurry, and the focusing is very aggressive. And whoever the focus puller on this film was better have gotten paid overtime, because the way that he was able to stay on top of everything and keep everything as clear as it was could not have been an easy feat. Kassovitz was very inspired by American film at the time, making obvious homages to Taxi Driver, like when during the scene when Vince is looking at himself in the mirror and he's like, "You talking to me? I'm the only one here," but he says it in French and without a really bad New York accent. And also paying homage to the way Spike Lee films are shot, in particular Do the Right Thing, with a camera rapidly moving in on a subject and making it the center of the frame. The soundtrack also takes inspiration from American music culture, an obvious instance being the scene that I mentioned earlier with the DJ up in the top floor of the Banu, where he is spinning and remixing KRS-One's Sound of the Police. Though I'm sure there are more examples in the film that I'm just not remembering at the moment. And actually, another similarity to Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing that I am sure Kassovitz didn't intend is its prophecy, because I think it should be noted that a decade later, after this film came out, a riot between French youths and police officers broke out at a Banu, which lasted for over half a month, which started because two teenagers of ethnic minority groups were electrocuted in an electrical substation, allegedly running from the police, and a lot of people were killed. And another one happened just 2 years ago, in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown, because of the way police officers treated ethnic minorities. So, yeah. Glad to see nothing's changed. Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, still relevant for some reason. And La Haine, also evidently still relevant. La Haine, directed by Matthew Kassovitz, is pretty good. Watch La Haine, directed by Matthew Kassovitz. It's time to go to break. I am so sorry for the long-winded gearing up to just talking about a movie that I was just going to talk about anyway. So, yeah, sorry. On to break. Thank you for listening to Cinema Cid, the Kriterion Kid, on the radio voice of Kutztown University, KUR. This is the time of the show where I stop talking about movies because it is the end of the show wherein I talk about movies. I will see you next week, or rather you will hear from me next week, so take care. If you'd like to write into the show, you can DM at CinemaCid, the Kriterion Kid, on Instagram, or send CinemaCid, the Kriterion Kid, an email at gmail.com. Both of those are spelled with a K for alliteration's sake, because kid is the first letter that kid starts with K. If you would like to keep up with me and just like other supplemental stuff regarding Kriterion, or what I might think of certain releases, or for example what Piper was doing last week, again, you can follow at CinemaCid, the Kriterion Kid, on Instagram. That's spelled with a K because kid also starts with a K. Take care, stay safe. I will be back next week to talk about some movies.